Alright, so the Eagles look like they're making a couple changes on the defense as Cooper DeJean appears close to starting. And what are the odds we see more of guys like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Jalyx Hunt? Plus, the coaching staff added a few promising elements, and Jalen Hurts might have just saved Nick Sirianni's job, or at least for now. So let's talk about what he said, why that matters, and the reason not to sell on this season yet. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So let's start with a big congrats to my guy Will for winning the Isaiah Rodgers helmet giveaway, aka Cinda, who won it via the randomized spinner, and as you can see, it's been shipped out to him and I no longer have it for those that wanted proof. However, while that one's gone, unfortunately for those of you that missed out, I do have this Saquon Barkley autographed helmet as well, which I'm going to be giving away later. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, while I say that, a perfect opportunity to shout out the official sponsor of the channel, Underdog, for making this happen. And reminder, there's not a better time to get signed up, because it's Boosttober, where they're giving out a free promo every single day. And they honestly just keep getting better. Like, for example, they offered Profit Boost recently, where I was able to turn a couple $25 pick'ems into some serious cash. So just make sure to use the QR code or use my code PHILLYSPECIAL with the link in the description, and then just pick one other pick to get started. By the way, get signed up right now to get a Brock Purdy pick for free, or if you wait till this weekend, they're going to have a Joe Burrow automatic winner. I mean, considering A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are back, I'd personally look at a potential play on one of them pairing up with a free Joe Burrow pick. Now, I get it, Underdog may not be available in all locations. However, there's good news, because even though the pick'ems aren't available in Philly yet, they do offer their draft contests in Philly, where you enter by drafting a weekly lineup like you would in fantasy, and then see who can accumulate the most points with a winner-take-all format. So again, get signed up today, and if you use my code PHILLYSPECIAL, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash for your first-time deposit. Also, I've had several comments about the Draft League, so I'm going to post a link in the description as well as in the comments for the Draft League, but again, a fair warning, these things fill up super fast, so I'll do as many as possible, but, just be the first one to go on and sign up. Alright, good luck to you, and speaking of luck, the Eagles' luck might be starting to change. Because as Lane Johnson put it, the Birds have only scratched the surface in terms of what the offense can do.
Playing, I feel good, and I feel like I can help this team, and we've had great success. So I think we'd all like to start picking up, our ability on this team, what we can do. I think you've seen flashes what this offense can do. We have to be consistent. So glad to get AJ back, Devonta back, myself back, and see what we can accomplish.
Remember, this offense is the one that put up 34 points in Week 1 despite turning the ball over 3 times. And yeah, we all recognize that's not the recipe for success. But as I've said, having the full complement of weapons is definitely going to pay dividends. It just, comes down to cleaning up a few things, which is apparently what they did over the bye week.
Any self-reflection that you go through, it's got to start with being humble to say, what are the issues? I was impressed by the players and their their involvement in it, as far as the way, not only did we study it, there were some guys that really buckled down and studied it themselves. I was just really impressed by that and their interaction back with that. Really impressed. It showed their hunger.
Well, hopefully they're hungry to start games quicker, with the positive being the head coach citing that'll be a bigger area of emphasis for the offense, seeing as though they're last in the NFL with 0 points in the first quarter. But as for the defense, they've been working on tackling, with the Birds implementing a new tackling drill at practice this week, deciding to thankfully do away with the stupid tackling donut, and electing to use safeties coach Joe Casper as a live tackling dummy.
I didn't mean to hurt you. Coach told me to pretend.
Look, ultimately, I think we're all for whatever works and leads to fewer missed tackles, with the linebacker unit above everything else, especially because they rank near the very top in terms of missed tackles. Although I get it, and here's some of the comments thinking if that's the tackling attempt we're going to get from practice, then is anything really going to change in the game? Of course, while that remains to be seen, one change, as we all know, is that Devin White is no longer an Eagle. And be honest, if I'd asked you before during training camp would Devin White play more snaps than Rashad Penny did last season, you would have said yes. However, the former All-Pro oddly didn't play a single snap and is now free to sign with another NFL team. Now, I've talked a lot about it recently, so I'm not going to do a deep dive, but even though it's not a good look for Howie Roseman, at least the positive is that the GM was able to get White to agree to a restructuring of the contract, which ultimately alleviates some financial loss, in order for White to get released ahead of the trade deadline. Still, the fact that we never saw White play a single snap is crazy. Yet the positive, again, if you're looking for one, is that move really just speaks toward the trust in Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to back up Nakobe Dean.
I'm really excited about the guys in the room and the way they're progressing, and I think Coach King, our linebacker coach, is a great fundamental teacher. I just continually see them improving their fundamentals, in different aspects of block destruction and different things like that, blitzing, and so. again, like I said, just excited about the room that we have and the depth that we have there. These aren't just things that we make decisions on as far as no evidence. Like we practice every day. We walk through every day. We meet every day, obviously. And come to those conclusions in that aspect.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but just because I hear that, it still makes me a little uneasy. I mean, I believe in Trotter, and said back in the preseason that I felt like he'd get a more prominent role before season's end. However, the job is still clearly Nakobe Dean's to lose. Yet it goes without saying that if Dean has another 5 missed tackle game, then he'll be out of a job. Because shout out to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, but Vic Fangio appears to already be making a change or two, reporting that Cooper DeJean is expected to start over Avonte Maddox versus the Browns. But that wasn't all, as Fowler also said he was told multiple defensive positions were evaluated and up for discussion this past week. So put 2 and 2 together, and it's fair to say several of the defensive guys have a very short leash. Which is why it's definitely worth keeping an eye on a guy like Jalyx Hunt, because Fangio was already a big fan of him during the draft. Thus the reason, he took a 3rd-round pick for him. Plus, if he's already playing his first couple picks, then, his 3rd-round selection, the fact that there's no defensive line, at least in terms of a pass rush, it can't get much worse. By the way, also another point to add, the Eagles have apparently been using Jalyx Hunt to mimic Myles Garrett this week in practice, and help the tackles get ready for him. No, I'm not saying he's Myles Garrett, but if you don't pressure early, then I'm all for giving the rook some snaps. Now, speaking of adding something that's missing, Sidney Brown should be back in the rotation soon, as the second-year safety got in a full practice and has been showing signs that he's healthy and ready to go in game. So again, seeing what the defense has been lacking and Brown's athleticism and physicality, it seems like the most obvious choice. Anyway, what do you guys think about the changes or potential changes expected on the defense? Alright, while you're letting me know that, let's get into the positive Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni development. So remember how back earlier this summer, ESPN's Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler reported that the relationship between Sirianni and Hurts was strained, unhealthy, and possibly even fractured? Yeah, okay, come on, we've all known there's something. Especially when you think about just last week, Jalen gave this response about him and Sirianni working together to correct things in the offense.
We have our moments.
Come on, that's something you say about someone you don't necessarily really care to hang around with. However, as it's understood with QB1, rarely does he not do anything with complete intentionality. So fast forward to this week, and Jalen seemed to have a kumbaya with Sirianni.
This is probably, I say, one of the most efficient bye weeks I've been a part of this year. With my career, just been able to, like I said, share those moments and talk through some things and build.
What do you guys talk about? What made the moments great?
I won't get too into it, but some great moments. You can interpret what hard is, direct. You want to kind of make it as clean as possible, and you kind of have the parameters you have when you're out there on the field, and you want to abide by those parameters and go out there and play clean football. And so, I think that's why it's so important to communicate, and I think that's exactly what we've had the opportunity to do. Talking to all of my coaches and really building.
Notice how many times he referenced moments, but seriously, this will probably be a moment that we look back on and say this was a turning point for the Eagles, or at least hopefully this was a turning point for the Eagles season. I don't know, maybe that's too optimistic, but you could certainly say Jalen Hurts saved Sirianni's job, or at the very least gave him an added lifeline. Now sure, perhaps Jalen was strongly encouraged to say that by the front office, but I think when you look at what happened between Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh, you have to appreciate what Jalen did. Because QBs in this league have a ton of power, even though A-Rod claims the he got Saleh fired allegations are patently false, citing the fact that he, loves Robert and didn't want to see him go.
Whether or not we're good enough to handle all the, or ready to handle all the cadence. Cadence had not been an issue. All camp felt like our operation had been operating pretty good. Obviously, today it took a major step back.
It's one way to do it. The other way is hold them accountable. We haven't had an issue. We've had one false start. Morgan had one false start, I believe, until this. So, it's been a weapon. We use it every day in practice. We rarely have a false start. And to have, 5 today, it seemed like, 4 or 5. Yeah, it seems like an outlier. I don't know if we need to make mass changes based on, kind of an outlier game.
Sure, it's like they say, love comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms. Yet we all know better when it comes to Rodgers. Let's not forget that this is the guy who got Mike McCarthy fired. Fine, you're right, 12 did say he was utterly shocked when Mike got the axe. And Green Bay president Mark Murphy revealed back then that the Packers QB had no role in McCarthy's firing. Except it was no secret that Rodgers frequently challenged his head coach's plays. And then add on top of that, the fact that the Packers and McCarthy decided to get rid of Rodgers' quarterback coach Alex Van Pelt, and things got a little testy, with a future Hall of Famer going on ESPN to voice his displeasure in the fact that his QB coach didn't get retained, saying, "I thought it was an interesting change. Really, without consulting me, there's a close connection between quarterback and quarterback coach, and that was an interesting decision." Of course, let's come back to present day, where the Jets practically mortgaged all of their long-term future to get A-Rod, and we all know better to think Rodgers doesn't have any pull in the building. By the way, this is the same guy who got Matt LaFleur to change up his offense for him and nearly got him out of the building in Green Bay as well. Except now we see what LaFleur and Jordan Love look like in that offense, and maybe the Packers dodged a bullet. Anyway, I say that to say, sure, Jalen Hurts may not have necessarily the same power that Aaron Rodgers does, yet he also had his former QB coach and offensive coordinator fired as well, in what turns out to not be near as much of Brian Johnson's offense last season as what we initially thought. Now hear me out, I'm not mentioning this to stir up something, in fact, it's actually a positive. The reason it's important, though, is to see the high ground Jalen's taking, and the fact that he's willing to come on board, have his head coach's back, and try to salvage this year. Having said that, though, there's obviously still a ton of work to do, and Hurts has got to quit turning the ball over. Yet you can't deny that he didn't fumble this one coming out of the bye. Anyway, curious to get your guys' thoughts on all of this. Where are you at with the Jalen Hurts and Sirianni? Do you think it was a big deal? Do you think he's just saying that? Did he actually mean it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But with all the developments and changes in Philly, I had to get Pro Football Network's Anthony DiBona on to update on this and get his take on everything else around the Birds. Some of the biggest news that we talk about really within the NFL is the Robert Saleh news of him being fired by the Jets and the Aaron Rodgers controversy. What's going on? What's really, Aaron Rodgers saying that they are, good relationship. Who really knows? You really buying that necessarily? But the ramifications for the Eagles side naturally became, okay, well, Nick Sirianni, is on the hot seat before that, maybe a little hotter after that news. And then we're coming off of the bye week where this is a team that still has everything in front of them, but, at 2-2 and what we've seen, the lackluster offense, yes, there's been the injuries, but the lackluster offense, defense, not really sure there, and some of the same types of issues that we saw from last season, it's led to the question of, is Sirianni the guy? How long will he be here? All this other stuff. But I've got to ask you to start out, Jalen Hurts, press conference, kind of in a way stands up for Sirianni, or at least says the most positive thing, I guess would be the best way to phrase that in terms of speaking about Sirianni and towards their relationship. I'm curious because people watching this, kind of see it earlier here in the video, but curious your thoughts on what that meant, I guess, for Jalen or from Jalen, and any takeaways there with the relationship and Sirianni's future.
I feel like you have to feel positive about it because the biggest knock on Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni as far as their relationship goes has always been that Jalen Hurts has kind of been reluctant to publicly take Sirianni's side and support him. Whereas in this one, I don't know if maybe the Eagles PR department kind of coached them up because of the Robert Saleh firing. And they were like, listen, you're going to be asked about Sirianni's kind of being on the hot seat and whatnot. But he said, listen, we're the two leaders of this football team. I have confidence in him moving forward. I have confidence in because of all that we've been through as a duo as well. So I think it was a great sign. And I feel like obviously they're going to have to prove it on the field because he can say whatever he wants. But if they come out and they lose to the Browns or they lose a couple of these next few games and things kind of continue to spiral out of control, then all of that means nothing. But no matter what, Jalen Hurts is going to be here. It's just a matter of if Sirianni is going to be here as well moving forward. So he said all the right things, and we're just going to see how it goes moving forward.
And you mentioned that, too. If Jalen Hurts is going to be here, you pay the guy $255 million for a reason. I think most people are under the impression that that is the case, yet there's some of a spinning, and going back to Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh, there feels like there's a lot of similarities with the New York Jets organization, or at least a lot of inner workings between the two, because we talk about Bryce Huff, CJ Uzomah, who didn't work out but still from the Jets, EJ Jenkins from the Jets, Mekhi Becton, the trades, the different movements, Haason Reddick's situation that is also very strange and odd, but just a lot of back and forth from that side. So you see it, and geographically it's close proximity, but also you have a team in the Jets who are floundering on offense and have been for basically the entire tenure of Robert Saleh's prior to him being fired, but the entire tenure of him being there. But it's a similar sense of, okay, the offense here, not really getting quick starts, getting into a hole, having to dig themselves out. The defense, hasn't been as good as the Jets one has with Saleh, but they still are trying to get something on board there. But when we look at the relationship of Aaron Rodgers, the comment was I don't really have necessarily, or the inference of it is that he didn't have the power to save Saleh. But come on, that you're not buying that, are you?
Absolutely not. I mean, the guy that basically handpicked the offense coordinator in Nathaniel Hackett. Then he had them sign Allen Lazard, had them sign Randall Cobb. I mean, he's basically handpicked all the weapons around him thus far. It seems like they're going to probably be making a move for Davante Adams in the next week or so. So to say that he's like blindsided by this move and that he had no say in it or whatever he's saying, I mean, it's just Aaron Rodgers is great with words. I'll just put it that way. I mean, the guy that he's always had a way to like weasel around things and kind of say two things at once without. So like maybe he didn't directly say it to Woody Johnson, but I'm sure Woody Johnson asked him and he was like, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. He didn't exactly like go for bat for him and protect Saleh's job. So, I mean, maybe Jalen Hurts had a meeting with Jeffrey Lurie and Nick Sirianni because he talked about how they kind of had like a great week of preparation. It was like the best, the most successful and an efficient bye week that he's had in the NFL. So maybe they had a conversation about Sirianni's job status or just like the team as a whole. And Hurts kind of went to bat for him there, and then he went to bat for him in the press conference. So it seems like they're kind of in two completely different situations as far as how they feel about their head coaches. But like I said, it's just a matter of how the team performs moving forward because wins and losses at the end of the day is all that really matters.
It is. And that's what it comes down to is wins and losses. What are we going to see from Jalen Hurts? But it was refreshing because, again, as you mentioned, and we can go back to so many different press conferences of, you know, how do you feel about Sirianni? You know, what's the issue? We have our moments, and we go to other press conferences of a couple words, you know. Do you have any endorsements? We think back to all the way after the playoff game and, you know, any thoughts on Sirianni's future? Like if he wanted to say something that would be very positive to the media, he could have. And it was like, I mean, give me something, you know? And so yes, there's conspiracy theories out there and everything else, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think that a lot of us could already see we take the Aaron Rodgers because the Aaron Rodgers Robert Saleh situation because it's the most recent, but you could see that there's something going on there, something that maybe isn't firing or hitting on all cylinders on that side. And so if you have an instance where the Eagles are here, I think it's at least promising of, hey, you know what? Whether it is I'm taking the next step to be a vocal leader, I'm trying to get everybody on the same page, I'm saying positive things. I don't know if that necessarily was. We won't probably know. Maybe we get some extra insight, but was that the front office coaching Jalen up to say that? Who knows? But I think optics-wise, okay, it's good. It's better than it was, but ultimately it still comes down to, you know, what are they going to do on the field? And so that's the question. Do you see this group because we've talked about it prior to the bye week and, you know, a number of times offhand and things like that. But injury-wise, guys coming back, do you see this group, particularly on the offense, being more efficient, starting faster, Jalen, you know, starting to get a grasp of the offense, I guess, so to speak? Do you see that happening?
Well, there are no more excuses because it seems like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Lane Johnson, they're all going to be back. So, I mean, they said they went through, like Sirianni said, the last 4 years of his tenure, not just this season as far as the first 4 games, as far as like finding what works, what doesn't work, and getting off to a better start in the first quarter. And I think, I mean, their first quarters have been terrible, but they've also voluntarily left some points out there by opting to not go for field goals and whatnot. So, I mean, they if they don't score against what looks like one of the worst teams in the league to start the game, it's going to be rough moving forward because you can't do that, especially coming out of a bye week with everybody healthy. It seemed like the offense was on fire in that first week. And then obviously A.J. Brown missed the last 3 games and they've kind of went off the rails a little bit. But now with everybody healthy, a guy like Jahan Dotson, hopefully he's getting more comfortable as well. So now that they had this bye week to where they can kind of reconvene, go over everything, kind of get rid of what doesn't work and continue to utilize what does work, there's no excuse moving forward. If they're healthy, they have to have a faster start, and it's got to be turning into wins moving forward.
Hopefully it is. And it feels like that's almost like the answer to everything at this point is hopefully we see that. Hopefully they live up to expectations, what they're saying to us. But it's going all the way back to last season because this is a team that over the last, I believe, 13 games is 3-10, like a 3-10 record for a team with this roster. I don't care that, you know, okay, maybe a little bit of holes here and there on the defense, but a 3-10 record is not at all, not even close to what this team should be playing like. And everybody knows that. That's why there's so much frustration and, you know, a calling for Sirianni to be axed and everything else. But he's got a chance because they're not doing it yet. They have Cleveland coming up, and you mentioned it. It's like, of all teams to play, I don't know that there's a better squad that you pick out and say, hey, do you want to get on the right track? Like, what's the team that you want to sign up for and play? It's probably Cleveland at this point. You may be throwing Carolina, but probably Cleveland for how they've performed. Deshaun Watson, does not look like an NFL quarterback. I mean, he's just been abysmal. The offensive line's not giving him any time. The defense is trying to hold it together, but, God bless Jim Schwartz and them because they're not getting any help from the offensive side. So it sets up beautifully to get this momentum and try to go beyond that. But before we get into maybe some changes, some differences, you wrote a great piece as far as reasons for optimism. So I've got a link in the description for people that want to check that out. I got to just throw the hypothetical. If the Eagles somehow lose the game to the Cleveland Browns, does Sirianni keep his job?
It's so hard to tell because I tweeted about it because obviously everybody's frustrated. I get it. Like the start that they got off to, granted all the injuries and whatnot, but it just hasn't been inspiring football to watch. So, but if they lose this game, because I mentioned that like in Jeffrey Lurie's tenure as owner, that he's only fired one coach during the season, and it was Chip Kelly, and that was literally right before their last game of the regular season. So he's kind of giving guys quite a leash, even if he is going to move on from them. He gave Doug Peterson the whole year and whatnot. So, I mean, I don't know if he would actually pull the trigger, but at the same time, if you lose this game coming off the bye week to a team that looks like, honestly, the worst or one of the worst teams in the league, I mean, they're playing their third straight road game where they really don't have any legs. It seems like like Deshaun Watson literally doesn't look interested anymore, but like it just seems like if you can't beat this team after a week off and everybody getting like healthy, I mean, who are you going to beat? Because they've got, I know the records don't look great, but the Bengals are better than what they are. The Giants look better than what they are. So there's going to be some tough games. You still got to play Washington twice, Dallas twice. They've got some tough games that they're going to be playing. So if you can't win this game, then I feel like I personally, if it was up to me, I would fire him. I would promote Kellen Moore and you kind of see what he can do. Just let him have complete like control of the offense. Let him do what he can do. And because they've shown interest in Kellen Moore as a head coach candidate before, so you might as well give him almost like more than half a season to work with and see what he can do. But at the same time, I feel like interim coaches are kind of always set up for failure anyway. They don't really have the benefit of the doubt because they're kind of making changes on the fly. But yeah, if they lose this game, I feel like you have to make a change. But I don't know if Jeffrey Lurie really has it in him to do so.
Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. I mean, honestly. So again, there's a hopefully from my side, but that's ultimately where we look at this team is get right, get the Cleveland game, get this thing rolling. Yes, at New York might be a little bit more difficult than what we expected. Daniel Jones played brilliant without Malik Neighbors. I don't know that necessarily made sense, but just take away more weapons and I guess DJ gets better. Last couple of games has looked pretty good. Defense as well. Hopefully it's the Saquon Barkley game, though, to remind them what they did lose. Still, if you get that momentum, and by the way, just for people that are watching this and curious, because we've mentioned it in the past, but we will be at the Commanders game, the Thursday night football game in Philly. So for people that, just see us walking around, we'll be at a tailgate and everything else. You might see us, say hi, whatever.
I went to one game last season. It was the Vikings game, and they won, so I'm looking to keep that undefeated streak alive, so we'll see.
Jaden Daniels. That's going to be a difficult matchup, but I hope you're right. Yes, let's whatever it takes. So far, I've also undefeated in the last two games. So it's the Miami game.
No pressure, Eagles. No pressure.
And I was it the Miami game, and then the 49ers game, which was the NFC Championship. So those are the past two in Philly. I'm not so great in Dallas, but nothing has seemed to work over the last 6 years, 7 years, however long we're going on since 2017.
That place is just cursed. So. Don't worry about it.
Hopefully it changes this year. But speaking of changes, though, in the immediate, we look at some potential that we have from the offense, the defense as well. And shout out to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN for writing the article on, or the initial take. We got some other confirmed reports, but it sounds like Cooper DeJean could be starting at nickel. We'll see officially whenever the team announces the starting lineups and everything, but sounds like he could be taking over for Avonte Maddox, a bigger role there. But then also there was a little bit of a reference to maybe we see a couple other changes. They talked through some stuff during the bye within Vic Fangio's defense. Could you see a little bit more snaps or reps from a Jeremiah Trotter Jr.? I believe that you tossed that idea around as well. And then, also looking at a Jalyx Hunt, who we have not seen much of at all. If we're talking about a pass rush or a defensive line that's not been productive, it couldn't really hurt anything. But what did you make from his article? I know you also mentioned it, talking about potential changes, but what are we looking about as far as the defense and any moves there?
Well, first of all, I feel like you have to be super excited about Cooper DeJean kind of stepping in that slot role. I feel like Vic Fangio kind of wanted him to be there before he got hurt, and then obviously that set him back. But he talked about how that role in his defense is almost more of like a linebacker role. So a guy like Avonte Maddox, given his size and his unwillingness to tackle, we'll put it nicely, because he kind of just throws his head down. I mean, he tries, but it's not the prettiest thing in the world. So having him kind of out on the edge for those like stretch runs and stuff, it's not a great look. So Cooper DeJean should look a lot better there. Obviously, he'll be tested in coverage because people are still worried about him being able to flip his hips and stay deep with guys. So we'll see how that works out. But I think the return of him and having a bigger role, and then I'm really excited if Sidney Brown is activated. I'm like the biggest Sidney Brown fan as far as like, even as just a prospect coming out of college. I feel like he's kind of like a tone setter, and that's kind of what this defense needs right now. But as far as that Jeremy Fowler article and what he could have been hinting at, I don't know if they'll actually kind of limit Nakobe Dean's reps. I think maybe that's just me overreacting to kind of the mess against Tampa Bay. But I mean, if you have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who showed flashes during the preseason, and if Nakobe Dean does continue to struggle, or if this ankle injury is a problem and he potentially misses the game, I feel like that can give them a look there. And then I also mentioned, like you said, Jalyx on the edge, because who else are you really getting anything from besides Brandon Graham, who's up there in age? So I think if you could kind of throw him in there for a couple reps. He played a little bit at the end of the Tampa Bay game, and I thought he played pretty well, especially in run support and just overall effort. He was chasing down plays to the opposite side of the field and whatnot. Or maybe it's something as small as like Thomas Booker and Moro Uzomah getting more snaps on the inside. Maybe that's what happens, and it's less of a big deal. But regardless, I just think Howie Roseman's kind of talked about getting those young guys in there, and I feel like they have kind of an abundance of young talent that hasn't really gotten a chance yet. So hopefully it'll also amount to some wins as well, but it'll be fun to kind of watch the young guys develop too.
I'm really excited to see several of those different guys. And you mentioned, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Again, if Nakobe Dean is having 5 missed tackles in a game, then like it's a foregone conclusion. You're just going to say, okay, look, we have to try something else because it's not good enough. Now, so far, he's had at least enough of a leash for Vic Fangio to go back to that, to decide, you know what, he's going to be our guy. He will be the future here as of, next week or two. We'll see how long. But it was also enough of Devin White to just go ahead and cut him. That was the other news earlier this week as far as, what took place in the Eagles organization. That's one of those that's also, it's kind of strange. It's a little odd just with how it played out. You started seeing that it was feeling like it might go in this direction, and you called it out, I think, several days ago. But it's like you still envision when Devin White signed with the Eagles, the podcast that he went on, I think the Pivot podcast was the initial one, and just talking about like a rebranding, coming here to Philadelphia, being a linebacker they haven't had, and I think everyone understands, like, sure, you want to talk it up, you want to hype it up, you're trying to, heck, even Rashad Penny said this is a refresh for me, and we never saw the guy, right? So, but we actually saw, which is crazy, we saw more Rashad Penny than Devin White on the Eagles football field this year, because Devin White didn't play a single snap in the regular season. And if you had asked me, do I want to take a bet that Devin White plays more snaps than Rashad Penny, I would have thrown a ton of money at that thing before the season. So it is a little bit surprising, especially because of all those ramifications. And then he was getting the first team reps, and we've gone all down, that whole line before. But first team reps in training camp during the preseason, and then to not even play at all. I get the whole, not playing special teams, not having that ability. But the way this thing played out, to me and to a lot of people I've seen comments, it's odd. It's strange for what that is. But I guess my biggest takeaway, and I'm curious to get yours, my biggest takeaway is I guess that means that there was a belief enough in Nakobe Dean, Zack Baun, and or Ben Van Sumer and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. What do you make of that?
It's such an odd situation. And I feel like we've talked about it a little bit before, but like, the fact that he was dominating first-team reps in training camp, like it wasn't like he was splitting starts 50-50. It seemed like for most of training camp up until those like last 2 weeks, which weren't really open to the reporters, so we didn't really hear too much about it. So like for like the public practice and whatnot, it seemed like he was the guy. Him and Zack Baun were like the starting linebackers, and then all of a sudden he misses the first game due to the ankle injury or whatever, injured pride, whatever it may have been. But like it's just so odd that like, he, like you said, he was so hyped up. He was a former Pro Bowl, potential All-Pro, whatever. And then, like, sure, he didn't have the greatest end to his tenure in Tampa Bay, but, like, he seemed to be a lot better than what anything the Eagles have had in recent years. But after the whole Shaq Leonard situation last season and now this, I feel like the Eagles should just give up on signing like former Pro Bowl linebackers and just maybe stick to converting edge guys like Zach Baun, because he looks phenomenal compared to whatever these other guys are doing, because it just does. I mean, who knows? Maybe Devin White like won't even sign with another team, or he'll sign with another team and not look great, and the Eagles will look right. But the fact that they gave him $3.5 million guaranteed, or whatever it comes down to now, if they negotiated something different or whatever that report is regarding that. So it's just still like the whole situation doesn't look great. I mean, he was one of your biggest additions on defense in the offseason, and then the fact that, like you said, he literally didn't even play. So it's just like, it just seems like he's going to be the answer to some trivia question on like a cruise 20 years from now. Like, oh, who did the Eagles sign? And what former Pro Bowl linebacker did they played for, like signed with the Eagles but never played a game? It's like, oh, Devin White. I know that one. It's just like, it's such a weird situation. I don't know. Like you said, it's the Rashad Penny situation, but like on defense this time.
It is. It's the Rashad Penny. It's the Frank Gore. I mean, I know people want to throw that one in there. You know, just the odd random like, oh, we're gonna see anything at all from a player? Are we going to actually have something happen? But it's just like it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I will say that, you know, when we talk about linebackers that have either been here and played, or just players in general that, you know, okay, where are they going to go? Some of them, fine. Like Rashad Penny it doesn't matter, because whenever he leaves, I think did he go to Indy or where did he go?
Well, this season he signed with the Panthers, I think, right?
Oh,
and then,
Panthers, yes. And then
he retired I think, after that?
Before. Yes, okay. I was trying to think of who that went to. It was very quick, wasn't going to work out. So that one's, you live with that one, because like he was not, you could tell when he was on the field, but we haven't even seen Devin White. So what I'm curious of is, first off, who signs him, if someone does, but I would assume someone will. He's getting out of his deal here earlier, before the trade deadline. So hopefully, you know, for him, that there's maybe a team out there, a suitor that does pick him up. But then what I'll be even more interested in is keeping an eye just kind of from afar to see, is Devin White playing? And then is he starting? And like, how good is he playing? I don't think that many people, myself included, had expectations of, oh, he's going to be here in Philly and he's going to be a Pro Bowler. Like, there was the hope, but I don't think from what we've seen from the tape previously of, oh, he's going to just completely shatter anything else that we've seen from Eagles linebackers. But if he's even just decent and average, then you would still have to ask yourselves, from what we've seen so far, maybe Nakobe Dean turns a corner, but it would be nice to have had that depth, and also maybe to see him play a few games and to get some starts. So I don't know. It'll be definitely one of those, like I say, keep an eye out from afar, because I'll be more irritated if that's another one where we go, well, there's another linebacker. There he went. Yeah,
it's going to be, like you said, it's something to monitor moving forward, because like you said, if he goes somewhere, especially if it's like the Cowboys or somebody that the Eagles have to play, like, and then he looks great, like that's going to be the story of the offseason. Like, oh, Howie Roseman screwed that up, or Vic Fangio screwed that up, or whatever. But like, I don't know. I just feel like they wouldn't have cut him unless if they thought he was like legitimately really good. I just feel like he probably has an opportunity somewhere else. Probably if he looks decent, then whatever. But like the fact that you need your backup linebackers to play special teams, you really can't just carry a guy that's not going to play special teams, especially with like the limited 46-man game day active roster. So like you kind of need those guys to contribute in those roles. And if the fact that he seemingly, like, based on his quote, it seemed like he just didn't even want to do it, or like he said he only did it a couple of times and it was kind of like an emergency thing. So if it came down to that, then you really couldn't keep the guy around. You can't just wait around for an injury and hope that he'll be able to fill it then, because then he's basically just coming off the bench, hasn't even played special teams. He's only really practiced where contact is limited. So he's becoming cold off the bench. And now you just move forward with Nakobe Dean, Zach Baun. Hopefully they re-sign him, extend him. And then Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has showed promise. So if one of those guys pops up and becomes a long-term starter, I think that'll be a great look.
That would be an absolute blessing to see, honestly, for any linebacker. But you know, that's where we're at necessarily or that's where we're at for the linebacker spot. Given the Devin White news, though, it does kind of play into the Sidney Brown return. He was a full participant in practice coming off of the ACL injury, so it'll be interesting. You know, how quickly do we see him? You know, playing versus it's one thing. Great, good news that he got a full practice in based on the estimated injury report. But it's another thing to say he's, you know, ready to suit up and get meaningful snaps in a game. Nonetheless, when you did start taking a look at this roster and you're going, hey, Sidney Brown's about to come back, Ainias Smith is ready to come back. You've got other guys within, I guess, I don't think we've heard anything officially from James Bradbury, but there's, maybe eventually. But other roster spots you needed to open up. It's like, okay, who is that going to be? Are you going to try to cut someone on the offensive side? Are you going to try to cut somebody within defense? Like, is Eli Ricks on the bubble? Is Thomas Booker on the bubble? Devin White, who had not played at all. So you kind of called it out, like I say, several days ago. It seemed to reason, but it becomes official. And, now we assume that Sidney Brown will be back very quickly. And you brought him up as well because you were the big time president. After what's the name of is it just the Sidney Brown fan club? The president?
Yeah, that's
I know you got the look good, feel good. So it's multiple.
Sidney Brown fan club is good.
Okay. I don't know if there's any term limits for the president of the look good, feel good club and
that's a, but I guess that's a lot. That's a lot to fit on my resume.
Feels
but
like
I'll
try
and squeeze it in
interest there. Maybe, but I don't know. And also shout out to Shane Haff because I guess he's the self-proclaimed VP of
he's the
Brown.
VP. Yeah.
So okay, but lots of people, understandably, should be hyped about Sidney Brown. Now he doesn't come back and fix the defense, right? Like no one's going that far, but to have his aggressive style of play, his downhill speed and athleticism, and the way that he hits people or is willing to hit people. Now, we could talk about some missed tackles. Certainly, comes to mind for the Seattle game last year. We saw some other instances. But it is a different type of feel than several, not all, but several of the Eagles' defensive players. And so I'm curious, is he going to, or I guess how quickly do you think he's going to get out there? But also, do you see him making, I'm not saying fixing the defense, but do you see him making an impact sooner rather than later on this Fangio defense?
Well, I just believe that Sidney Brown is just an impact player in general. I feel like even last season, if he played, whether it was 5 snaps or 15 snaps, and then you kind of saw his role kind of grow right before he got injured, and I was calling for it for weeks. I was like, this defense has no identity. Why is Sidney Brown not playing more? And then sure enough, he plays and he had the long pick 6, or he made a play on special teams or a big hit here and there. I just feel like, sure, he's going to have his whiffs because he's just such an aggressive player. But I've mentioned it here a bunch of times that I'd rather a player that you kind of have to reel in a little bit than a player that you kind of have to teach to be aggressive. So Sidney Brown's a guy that I've loved, like I said, since college. So I think once he is ready to play, I feel like, honestly, I think he might be activated this week because the fact that they have an open roster spot after releasing Devin White and they didn't bring anybody in to work out or kind of tease a signing there. I mean, they hosted a punter, but that was because it was a left-footed punter. They wanted to just get that work in because the Browns punter is left-footed. So it seems like Sidney Brown would make sense. I mean, if they cut a defensive player, you would think another defensive player would kind of fill that void. And Ainias Smith could be activated because they only have the 4 active receivers. But now that you're getting A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith back, I feel like they're kind of in better shape there. So they could always just elevate John Ross from the practice squad 2 more times. So. But I think Sidney Brown posted on Instagram it's time. He put the caption there when he kind of they activated his practice window.
Oh yeah.
And then Nick Sirianni was asked about Sidney Brown today at his press conference, and if you watch it, he turns to I guess the Eagles PR person or whoever to the side. He's like, "Did we say anything about that?" It almost looked like he was trying to figure out if they announced that he was actually signed to the active roster yet or not. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seemed like he got really almost a little too excited when he started talking about Sidney Brown and what he can bring to the team, but. I think, like I said, I think Sidney Brown's a tone setter. I think even if he plays just 10 to 15, 20 snaps, whatever he plays, I feel like he's going to be a difference maker. And like I said, he's going to have his mistakes here and there. But overall, I think this defense kind of needs somebody to set the tone and be a presence and make themselves known in the field. And I feel like he'll be able to do that.
I cannot wait. Again, what we've seen from him last year, and even if it's slow, you kind of ease him into it a couple, 5 snaps, 10 snaps, whatever it is. But you're right, tone setter. The defense needs it. You also just talking about or mentioning, what the Eagles should do, possibilities. You did write an article as far as fixing the Eagles and getting back on track. So again, link in the description for people who want to check out the articles. Official Eagles reporter of Pro Football Network, Anthony DiBona. They've done a couple of those already. So I believe that Howie Roseman is a avid reader, as you mentioned as well, because he's kind of just taking those moves and saying all right, hey, here's one of the steps, or the coaching staff as well, saying, what should we do? How should we go about this? Talk about some other potential moves, or maybe even the moves that they've done so far, fixing the Eagles, getting them back on track this post-bye week.
Well, yeah. So right before we started recording this, I actually was just on the phone with him. So we were talking about the three next steps that he needs to take.
Perfect
so, no.
then.
But in all seriousness, I mean, some of the things I mentioned, I feel like the starting Cooper DeJean over Avonte Maddox was kind of something that a lot of people said. I don't think that's like anything too big. And I feel like I said to release or trade Devin White and Isaiah Rodgers. So, I mean, I guess half of that was right so far. We'll see what happens with Isaiah Rodgers. But my other 3 ones were, this might be a little controversial, but after the Eagles benched Jalen Carter for him being late or whatnot to the team function or whatever Vic Fangio referred to it as, I think one thing they could do to kind of set the tone of like accountability and whatnot moving forward is to bench Darius Slay for the opening series against the Browns. I feel like what he did on the Micah Parsons podcast, and you can go into whether it was right or wrong, but even last season I was pretty critical about his lack of accountability and leadership. So this is nothing new. If you've been watching what either reading what I write or watching videos that I'm in, I feel like I've kind of been a big critic of Darius Slay's lack of leadership. So I think if you kind of set that tone and say, hey, listen, like you can't do that. You can't be laughing at teammates publicly, or we know you're a jokester, but still that's not like the greatest optic for the team, especially considering we're 2-2 and things are already going out of control. Like that's the last thing a team captain should be doing. So I think Vic Fangio kind of being that stern guy saying, hey, listen, sit out this series. Like you can't be doing that. If you like, we have other guys that can replace you moving forward. It's not like you've been playing spectacularly well this season either. Like, so now you have to step up for your actions and act accordingly or fall in line, or if not, then you're not better than anybody else. So I think that would kind of help set the tone with that. And then the next step, which we're never going to get a public answer on, but I think Sirianni needs to he kind of referred to being the backseat driver with Kellen Moore, but in the article I said he needs to get completely out of the car because it seems like it's not Kellen Moore's offense. I mean, the motion usage is kind of declining. The usage of plays under center is kind of declining. So it just seems like it's just reverting back to what we saw last season. Hopefully the bye week changes that and they kind of went over things and kind of scrapped whatever wasn't working. But yeah, I think he needs to just completely get out of the offensive meeting rooms. I know that's technically his bread and butter and how he's became a head coach, but it's just not working too well. And then lastly was utilizing Bryce Huff in a 4-point stance, which is kind of a shout out to Brian Baldinger, who kind of highlighted how it seemed like all of his sacks when he was a player for the Jets were in a 4-point stance, and he was allowed to kind of use his get off and his speed that way. But meanwhile, he's just in a 2-point stance as a rush outside linebacker for the Eagles and not really looking too comfortable so far. So if they can do those 3 things, I think they'll be in great shape. But I think we won't hear about at least one of those. So who knows?
That's true. But Eagles, if you're listening, I mean, there you go, which apparently Howie Roseman's either was on the phone or you got the direct line of communication. You do have the direct line of communication, it seems like, to Jason Kelce. Shout out to you that Kelce was tweeting you back and forth.
That was the highlight of my my bye week.
That was pretty sweet. Anytime you get one tweet is good, but when it's a multiple reply.
Oh no! When he replied, it was like, okay, now we're in.
That's
so,
true.
You know, I'm going to be on the next episode of New Heights. No big deal. So.
Okay, well, that's what I was figuring. That's probably next. You're going to upstage to that one, which is on to bigger and much better things. If maybe you just want to work a deal where just like a one-time appearance thing on the show here with Jason Kelce, that'd be great.
I'm loyal to you, Josh. Don't worry.
Just work the connections. That's all I'm asking. If you want to get Jason on here once,
I got you.
But no, as far as we talk about the ways to fix the team, get back on track, things like that. It totally makes sense from a number of areas there. But when we talk about Nick Sirianni, and you mentioned it too, I got a comment in one of the other videos, and his like, oh, I'm allowing him to drive the car, but he's backseat driving. It's like somebody said they said it perfectly or described it perfectly, but it's like, so he's literally admitting to being the most annoying person in the world. I mean, like you're going out there and you're saying, who in their right mind ever appreciates backseat driving? Like it doesn't help anybody, and it's dangerous most of the time too. So it's like when he goes out there and he's trying to, maybe it's an overemphasizing because he likes to use metaphors, he likes to use these analogies, but come on, that is one of those where everyone, as soon as you hear it, as soon as it started blowing up on Twitter, all the comments like those of, please no, like please do not be actually doing that. But what we've seen, you mentioned the motion, the statistics, what we've noticed from this offense is it's been less from what we've kind of expected to see of a Kellen Moore offense, not necessarily telling the story of the numbers. Now, it's not a full-blown, like, Sirianni's the only one calling plays. No one's saying that. But it is more of a reference before the bye of, okay, well, Sirianni's probably, inserting himself a little bit more into the offensive game plan and some of the play calling and moves like that. So I'm certainly with you. I do hope that we move beyond that. Kellen Moore gets the chance to see if this thing can work out. Still, there is some blame that we should say, regardless of who's calling plays or anything like that, with Jalen Hurts, and especially with the turnovers. Now, he said, as everybody said, the right things, it feels like, coming off of the bye and trying to get this thing right back on track. But is there, I guess it is concerning, but like to what level of concern are you at with the Jalen Hurts and the turnovers? Because I know that everybody's, most people are already admitting that, but it's like, it continues to be a drive killer or a crippler in terms of like, oh, you can go up by another score, get up by multiple, put this team to bed, so to speak, and get this one over with. How concerning are Jalen Hurts turnovers?
It's terrifying because now it dates back to last season, and it's kind of just like you were hoping that coming into this year that like, oh, Kellen Moore is going to be there. He's going to be much more efficient because of the way Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert played under him, and maybe he'll have 30 passing touchdowns and only 6 interceptions or whatever. But like, I mean, granted, it sucks because he hasn't had AJ Brown for 3 games. So that's like one of his favorite targets, if not his favorite target. So, I mean, that kind of plays into the whole, like the slop. I mean, the motion percentage and things like that kind of declining. So maybe we'll see everything kind of turn back to normal when AJ Brown returns and things look great coming out of the bye week. But I mean, to say that you're not concerned at all about Jalen Hurts' like turnover issues, I mean, that's just being like a homer and then just having your green tinted glasses on, because I mean, I see plenty of people just making excuses every week that like, oh, like it's the play call, there's no other option for him or whatever. But I mean, at a certain point, it's just like, this is too much for a guy getting paid that much. And I know he didn't have Devonta Smith and AJ Brown last week, but like doesn't even seem willing to throw to other guys like Jahan Dotson or Johnny Wilson when they are open. So it's just like, and that seems like it's been an issue for a while, dating back to last season, where like he refused to throw to like Jack Stoll or Julio Jones or whatever in like certain areas where like you see these guys go elsewhere, like Olamide Zaccheaus, and now he looks pretty damn good in Washington, where he was barely targeted in Philadelphia. So now you kind of have to think about like not only the turnover issues, but like the willingness to just take what's there and not have to force it to your favorite guys just because they're great players. I mean, granted, it's hard to argue against throwing the ball up to Devonta Smith or AJ Brown, but at the same time, if Dallas Goedert is right there or Jahan Dotson's right there, and it's just like an 8-yard gain, and then you get into like third and manageable instead of turning the ball over, you kind of just have to take what you're given. So hopefully the bye week kind of helped, and the meeting kind of helped, where Sirianni is always going to take accountability. He's going to say he has to teach it better or whatever. But the simple fact is Jalen Hurts cannot be turning the ball over like this if they want to make a significant playoff run.
Let me ask you too, because within Jalen Hurts and the concern for turnovers that need to be better, and he's admitted it. Sirianni even said they're on the same page. It's obviously a team thing from Sirianni's standpoint, which we can all understand. But yes, it starts with Jalen, and he said that. But has Jalen regressed in your mind? Because I've gotten a lot of comments, and I made a video recently about that, and I said no. So, and I'm perfectly fine if we have a disagreement here, but I'm just prefacing it with where I was, because in my mind, I'm not saying that he's not bad. I would say, hey, look, he's been bad. He's been definitely not good enough. You need him to perform better. Same all the standpoints of the turnovers and all that. But I'm still saying it's for me, and I get it for people that are like, yeah, it looks not great. But for me, he's had one game with the full complement of options for his offense with Kellen Moore, and then it's changing some stuff, and there's some growing pains and all this other stuff. So for me, I'm not ready to fully go out there and say he's regressed yet. I need to see like another game or two. You give if we're talking about like after the Giants game and we've seen 2 more games consecutively where it's like, okay, look, then sure, I would go to that point. But are you ready to say that he's regressed yet, or how close would you need to be until we're talking about that level?
I was killed like at the end of last season saying that he kind of looked like he was regressing, whereas like I brought up the whole like Carson Wentz end to that saga where like he just started turning the ball over at like an absurd rate, and then like you just couldn't put the guy out on the field. Basically, got to that point. But like now it's carrying over into this season. But like I said, with the whole injuries and whatnot, like it's hard to kind of judge that way. But I mean, you can't really say that he's trending in the right direction either, because I mean, no, he hasn't played well. So like the fact that he's second or whatever it is among all players in total turnovers this season, like you can't really be encouraged about that. I mean, granted, he's been better against the blitz, and has a better completion percentage and things like that. So in certain areas, he's taken a step forward. But I just think for a quarterback that's being paid what he's being paid, I feel like he should be a player that you can rely on to like elevate the talent around him and not necessarily like decline and fall down to the level of talent around him where you see a guy like Patrick Mahomes or even Josh Allen. I know Josh Allen played terribly last week, but I also think he shouldn't have been on the field after he took that hit. But that's a whole nother topic. But like,
yeah.
I just feel like I don't think Jalen Hurts is a guy that really makes others around him better. I feel like, which people might think is controversial, but I just think he's more so, he relies too much a bit, I think too much on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith at times where if they're not there, he kind of panics and crumbles under the pressure. So, I mean, hopefully they stay healthy moving forward and he kind of continues to ascend and move in the right direction. But it's honestly hard to be encouraged about what you've seen over the past 10 to 15 games from Jalen Hurts.
I mean, I can't, disagree with that. I like I said, it's been negative. I'm just not at the standpoint of, I'm not gonna call it regression. And maybe that's me in denial. Maybe I'm on board with, some of the like defending Jalen Hurts because I want him to be the guy. I want him to be, but also at the same time, he doesn't have to be elite for this team to win a Super Bowl. Like there's too much talent on the team already. If he's good and he's distributing the ball as he should be and limiting turnovers, then it's more than good enough, right? Like, and some people would say like, well, he's getting paid, all this money. He's not even necessarily getting paid all this money to be an elite quarterback. If he's a good quarterback with this roster, the way that it's built, then it's good enough. But I've still, I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. I'm not quite ready to get on board and say that he's regressed yet. But you're right. He's certainly trending in the wrong direction. It's just like my hope is after this bye, get the group, kind of start playing better, limit the turnovers. Maybe we can see him then start to take an upward trend. But I need just a couple more games before I'm ready to say, okay, you know what? We're calling it regression.
By no means am I saying that like Jalen Hurts is a terrible quarterback and he's never going to be good again. It's just like I'm literally wearing, I shouldn't show this, but I'm literally wearing a Jalen Hurts shirt right now. Like I support the guy.
There you
like,
go.
It's just like I could also like I have to be unbiased and I'm being a realist where like you have to just sit back and say like he hasn't looked great over the last year and a half or so or whatever it is at this point. So like if you're being honest with yourself, it's hard to be encouraged by what you've seen, but at the same time, you have to realize the totality of the situation in terms of the offensive scheme being changed and then key players going down. So like if he comes out of the bye week and struggles and they continue and he leads the league in interceptions or whatever, then yeah, it's going to be panic time and then he's going to be officially regressing. I feel like there's going to be no doubting that, but there's still plenty of time for him to turn it around, for the Eagles to turn it around. And we've seen him produce at an MVP caliber level before. So he could definitely do it again. It's just a matter of him putting it all together.
We'll see. Cleveland, hopefully, is the best remedy for that. If you, again, come out of bye, we talk about a team that you do want to see. Cleveland could be the one. The defense, it's not like they're no slouch, so it's still a test of sorts for Jalen, and hopefully if you come away from that and saying, okay, there's no turnovers, then that's good news, that's promising. But just the team as a whole with Cleveland, it's one of those that, yes, you should win the game. There's a reason that they're favored. I think 8.5 was the opening line. It might be bigger now, but it's one of those where you got to feel confident going into it. But how are you feeling? Do you expect the Eagles to take advantage of the Cleveland matchup? Are there areas of weakness or maybe extra, because we've talked about some of those, but some of the extra areas of emphasis on both sides really, but with this Cleveland matchup?
I've tweeted about it this week, and I was like, the Eagles can't really be concerned about style points and blowing this team out by 20, 30 points. I just feel like based on how those first couple of weeks went, you just want to like come out of the game healthy, come out of the game with a win, and just carry that momentum moving forward because the rest of the NFC East is playing better than probably most of us expected. So especially the Commanders and the Giants, maybe the Cowboys are a little bit of like a disappointment so far, but overall they've got to keep pace with this division. And if they don't do so coming out of the bye week, they're going to be in big, big trouble. But I also think, like you said, the Browns are like the perfect get-right game because it's one of the teams that's like spiraling more out of control than the Eagles are because they're not even really dealing with a bunch of injuries. It's just like, I mean, granted, their offensive line has been banged up, but they do have Deshaun Watson's healthy and Jerry Jeudy's healthy, Amari Cooper's healthy, David Njoku's coming back. So like they have weapons. Their defense is talented, but like you said, Deshaun Watson's not really playing well. But at the same time, if you look side by side, him and Jalen Hurts' numbers are kind of comparable because he has 6 total touchdowns and 6 turnovers. Jalen Hurts, I think, has 6 total touchdowns and 7 turnovers. So it's not like either one of these quarterbacks has been playing out of their minds. It's just a matter of who's healthier. I think Obviously, the Eagles have a much better offensive line. Deshaun Watson's been sacked 26 times this season in 5 games, which is just insane. But
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of said that going into other games this year where it was like, oh, this is the get-right game for the defensive line. Like, they have to get sacks this week, and then next thing you know, they get like 2 sacks or 1 sack.
Yeah.
And, like, Baker Mayfield is just, like, dotting them up all over the field. So it's a little bit worrisome that, like, the Eagles are so heavily favored and that everybody's expecting them to, like, blow the Browns out, because I think the Browns, especially their defense, is a little bit better than they're getting credit for. I think their pass defense is pretty solid. Their run defense is where you can kind of take advantage of them. They've allowed, I think, the 8th most rushing yards per game this season, but they are allowing a lot of points as well. So, I mean, I don't know if that has to do with the turnovers. They're allowing the 3rd most points in the game at 24.2 points per game. So maybe that's where the Eagles can finally put up some points in the first quarter, have a comfortable lead. But, I mean, the key is going to be Jalen Hurts not turning the ball over. It's going to come down to between Jalen Hurts and Deshaun Watson, who turns the ball over less. And, I mean, it's hard to feel encouraged about either one of those guys not turning the ball over right now. So we'll see what happens.
Good luck, yeah, to anybody who's going to try to take a bet on that one. Stay away. I would just say that. Stay away from the, no interception or no turnover for Jalen Hurts or Deshaun Watson at this point. Like, it's not even worth taking. We want to see it, but definitely don't make that one of your picks. We'll just say that. It will be interesting with the whole dynamic of this game going into it. Hopefully, and it feels like we say this again every single time, but like, just run the ball, run the football. Let's not get away from that. Let's not start out away from the running game and, just happen to remind yourself during the game or whatever it takes of like, let's just start out, right? You got Saquon Barkley for a reason. You got this offensive line for a reason. Make sure to use that weapon in running the football, make Jalen Hurts' life easier. I don't know. Maybe we will see it would be great, be phenomenal to see a Jalen Hurts clean game, no turnovers with this team moving forward into that, especially with, what you have coming up, some better opponents, build a little bit of momentum. But again, it remains to be seen until we can actually come out of, I think, multiple weeks, quite honestly, but even multiple weeks of like, hey, Jalen Hurts, like 70% completion, no turnovers, offense looked pretty solid. Even if there's some more situations of punting the football, like if drives stall just because it's incomplete or you didn't pick up enough yards running or whatever, like I will be, and I think most everyone will be much happier than that than to go, oh my gosh, they were moving the football down the field, and then, well, there's a turnover. There's another one. Oh, they're in the red zone, another turnover. There you go. It's like just
or a failed 4th down conversion in the red zone or whatever.
Don't do that. So yeah, please don't have those. But yes, something though that just changes from not turnovers. We will still say that,
it's just kind of sad. Like the expectations we had for this offense coming into the year, now we're like, just give us just get past the 50-yard line and we'll be happy. Like it's just like the expectations have been lowered by so much.
Give us no turnovers.
it's sad, but like with everybody getting healthy, I mean, if they can't turn it around like we said, then it's going to get awfully cloudy in Philadelphia.
Oh, yes, yep. I don't know. Maybe we'll be soon to see different things here. Lastly, before we go to score predictions, with guys getting healthy, you mentioned Ainias Smith very briefly, but with him coming back or soon to come back, the Eagles wide receiver situation as it is, do you expect to see, maybe not necessarily this week, but do you expect to see Ainias Smith in the rotation a little bit? Can he help out in any way? I know we get Jahan Dotson, so a lot of mouths to feed as it is. But do you expect to see Ainias Smith in any sort of, role at all?
I feel like they wouldn't have activated his practice window unless they had some intention to bring him back. Because I honestly thought for a while that they were kind of let him sit on IR for the whole season, kind of sneak him through to the roster next season, and then see what happens. But the fact that Britton Covey went out, I feel like he just fills that role so seamlessly, where he's kind of like that tiny, shifty receiver that can also be a return specialist. And now if Cooper DeJean is going to be your full-time slot cornerback, I feel like you don't really want him as your full-time punt returner because you just don't want to expose him to those extra hits that he might have to take. So I think ideally maybe whenever Ainias Smith is healthy, they can either, like you said, cut a guy like Eli Ricks where they can fill one roster spot from Devin White with Sidney Brown and then fill the other one with Ainias Smith, because they were initially carrying 5 wide receivers. So it's not like they didn't have that plan in place to begin with. Or maybe a guy like Grant Calcaterra is let go and they bring another tight end off the practice squad. It seems like Jack Stoll is kind of slowly taking that second tight end spot, which isn't the most encouraging thing in the world. But I mean, whatever it is, you have to kind of move the roster around that way. So I think eventually it seems like if they're activating his practice window, he's going to be brought in at some point because otherwise it's just a waste. But I just think the fact that he was activated and, like I said, that Britton Covey's out for, I mean, they said, like 8 weeks to begin with, but who knows? I think that can take longer. They can not want to risk it, especially being a punt returner where he's going to take some hard hits where guys are coming full speed. So maybe they want to kind of take it slower with him. But, I mean, it seems like they have a plan in place for Ainias Smith, and I'm excited because we didn't really get a chance to see him a bunch during training camp and preseason. He was kind of underwhelming. So the fact that he might be fully healed from all the injuries he's been going through and maybe have a role moving forward is kind of encouraging.
We'll see. Sub-Zero himself got the nickname for a reason. Hopefully live up to the nickname in a bigger way. You know, like a punt return, maybe not this week. We'll see how quickly he actually gets out there. But if he does, you know, or in the coming weeks, get a punt return.
I don't know, those zero nicknames haven't been too well with the Agent Zero really for the Eagles. So he might have to think of a different nickname for
else. Yeah, add a much bigger number at the end of that one. You know, it doesn't really work for the Sub-Zero part, but yeah, you're right. The Agent Zero, Sub-Zero. Yeah,
reply with a nickname for a nice
different ones. He may check it out because, you know, I know he's got his own YouTube channel. So one of these days, maybe we'll have Ainias on. But speaking of numbers, to wrap this thing up here, score predictions. Do you have something that you're confident with yet in terms of this Browns game, or what you're going to be going with?
I mean, my confidence is shattered with predicting scores at this point. It just seems like they've all been way off, but
it's more like a just requirement, you know, at this point. Yeah. It's who knows how accurate it's going to be.
Let's go Eagles win. I'll go up there.
All right, yeah.
Which that's pretty meaningful at this point. We'll take it. I'll go Eagles. I don't think they're going to put up some crazy numbers. I think it'll be like Eagles 24, Browns 13. I think it'll be like a relatively low scoring game, but kind of like a comfortable lead the whole time too. So 24-13 Eagles. I feel like it's pretty good.
All right. Well, I'm going with a little bit higher scoring. We have the same type of
56-3
spread on that, I guess. This is probably just more of like optimism. I don't know, but the fact that we have all the offense back, I want to see, like, come on, guys, you know, just have this game firing on all cylinders, no turnovers. So
everybody's looking for that Cardinals game from like 2017. I saw people posting on Twitter where it was like 30-0 like that. Like that's what everybody's expecing, but
that's what I'm
not sure it's going to look like that.
It's not what I'm expecting. That's what I want to see, but it's you know, recency bias. I will say I'm gonna go with, for people watching this thing back, I probably will change this, so it's not going to be, you know, it depends on when you watch this, because later on as we get closer to the game, it might be different. But I'm going to say 31-20. Eagles win. It's still 11-point spread there, but I'm hopeful if the offense gets clicking, if Jalen does not turn the ball over, maybe you get, who knows, maybe you get a defensive score. That would be great, like a Q pick six. He's had a close opportunity a couple of games. So 31, Deshaun Watson is asking, he's going to give you the football. He's going to gift wrap it for you. There's a chance to make a play. So maybe we see something there, but I'm going to say 31. And then it was pointed out to me earlier that the Browns have not scored, I believe it's like between 13 and 18 points all year. So if I'm saying 20, then it's the best performance for Deshaun Watson and the Browns offense. But I'm going to say 20 because I'm maybe not believing in the defense yet as much as I should. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully we see better numbers there, but still 11-point win, however it happens, is, I think everyone should be pleasantly happy with that one. I mean, content
get to 3-2, and then who cares how it looks, just move on and then just see what happens. People are going to be miserable no matter what, I'm sure. So whatever.
My gosh, yes. Just there is hope. Don't punt on the whole season yet, everybody. Like
I mean, if they win, if they win by 30 points, people are going to be like, oh, it was the Browns. They suck. Like, whatever. And if they win by 3 points, it's going to be like, you only beat the Browns by 3 points. And if they lose, it's going to be fire everybody, trade Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
So it's a
lose-lose. You're right. If you win, it's just like, cool, but whatever. Move on to next week. And you're right. If we lose, then it's just burn the ships and everything. It's completely over. So
unfortunately, that's where this team is right now.
Yes. But it's,
they did it to themselves.
It's not completely over. So please, everyone, like, just hold on for dear life. Maybe some of us are gluttons for punishment, but like, it can get better. There are some reasons for optimism. And again, I've got the link in the description. If you don't buy it from me, go check out Anthony's article. There are some reasons to be optimistic. And we'll see. Maybe it proves to be true, or maybe in a couple days or a week or two, it's complete BS. But we're trying. We're trying to hold out for hope here. So
people said I was too negative, so I had to put out a whole article of reasons to be optimistic. So.
I appreciated it. That was honestly like probably the quickest click for me, because I was like, oh, hey, it's reasons for optimism here. I can appreciate that.
You were like five reasons. Like, I can't think of 5 reasons.
Yeah, I was going, I can think of like 2, maybe 3, but a couple of those there. So, but yes, appreciate you coming on. It's been way too long. So make sure to go follow Anthony on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, but at DiBona PFN, official Eagles reporter of Pro Football Network, and check out his work. I mean, Anthony's got crazy amounts of articles, unlimited tweets, knowledge, information, everything else, but he's the guy to follow for all Eagles news. So
I appreciate it.
Anthony, you're the best. Appreciate you hopping on.
I try.
Have a good one. Everybody else, let us know your thoughts, takeaways, score predictions, what we got right, what we got wrong. We can agree to disagree. We'll have conversations, respectable ones in the chat. But I know that's all that it is in the chat. It's never anything beyond it. But
for sure.
Still, we appreciate you guys. So until next time, you know what it is. Go Birds.